Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Woke up today, went over to Traction, got in a workout, and as I was working out, Mac Chiwilli came downstairs from the Traction offices on high and said, "Hey, did you hear? Jimmy's back with the Saints." The Saints have, in fact, welcomed back an old friend.
Right back to the Saints, and Grant scores the touchdown. Slam dunk.
How about it? Jimmy Graham, who was traded away from the New Orleans Saints back in March of 2015, is back with the New Orleans Saints. Dennis Allen explained why Jimmy Graham fits what the Saints are looking to do.
A good addition for that room. You know, we've got some young ascending players in that room in terms of Foster Moreau, Juwan Johnson. You know, Taysom obviously has his role. We've got, you know, some young players that we feel good about and are looking to develop. And we felt like that Jimmy was kind of the perfect fit for that room.
I want to go through some of this. One more, though. Here was Mickey Loomis, Saints GM, on how the Jimmy Graham deal came together.
You know, there's been a couple of times in the past 4 or 5 years where when he became a free agent that we discussed bringing him back and had conversations with his agent, Jimmy Sexton. So it just, you know, it came down to a need on our part and a desire on his part to play this year. And we got, I think, a role that fits him and fits us and came together. So I'm excited about it.
A need on our part, a desire on his part to play again. I want to go through both of those things. First of all, Jimmy Graham is one of the biggest what-ifs in NFL history. That is not hyperbole, y'all. Jimmy Graham was drafted by the Saints in 2010. In 2011, he had one of the greatest receiving seasons for a tight end ever. Went over 1,300 yards in that 2011 season. Had 11 touchdowns on the greatest offense in NFL history. People forget that 2011 Saints offense broke all of the Rams' greatest show on turf numbers. Still devastating that they lost in San Francisco, but I digress. Jimmy Graham's 4-year stretch from 2011 to 2014 was as good as any 4-year stretch for any tight end in the history of the NFL until Travis Kelce right now. Travis Kelce has had 7 consecutive 1,000-yard receiving seasons, but even in that amazing stretch, Kelce's only had 3 years with double-digit touchdowns. Jimmy Graham's got 4. Okay, so for perspective, Graham had 1,300 yards in 2011. He missed 1,000 yards in 2012 by 18 yards, and he missed a game that year. So he would have had it. 1,200 yards in 2013, and then 889 in 2014, his last year in New Orleans. He also had 10 touchdowns that year, 16 touchdowns in 2013. Look at George Kittle, for example. Kittle's only had 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons and 1 double-digit touchdown year. 11 this past season. Go to Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez, greatest receiving tight end ever. He had 4 1,000-yard seasons in 17 years and only 3 double-digit touchdown years. Graham, again, as we said, has had 4 in his career. It's a giant what-if. Had Jimmy Graham stayed in New Orleans with Drew Brees in that offense, he probably would have been what Travis Kelce is now. Gronk obviously was magnificent. I don't want to leave Gronk out of the conversation. But my goodness, I mean, Jimmy Graham was otherworldly. And the Saints traded him, and they got Max Unger, who was a fine player. Max Unger was a really good center. And the Seahawks' first-round pick, which was the year they lost the Super Bowl to New England and had the 31st pick, and that turned into Stephon Anthony. So the Saints sent Jimmy Graham to Seattle for what amounted to Max Unger and Stephon Anthony. And they tried and tried and tried to replace Graham's production and never did it. They went through Kobe Fleener, and they went through Jared Cook, and they went through Adam Troutman, and they brought Ben Watson back, and they tried and tried and tried and tried, and they've never been able to find it. They're the closest now they've been with Juwan Johnson, a big 6'6" receiver they've converted to tight end who can run and jump and is a mismatch and all those things. But he still ain't what Jimmy Graham was. Now, the real question comes down to, what is realistic for Jimmy Graham in 2023? And, I wish that I could sit here and tell you that I thought Jimmy Graham is primed for this amazing 2023 season. He's going to drink from the fountain of youth. I just don't believe it. Jimmy Graham is 36 years old now. He's 36. And he didn't play in 2022. Sat out of football. After his 5 years in New Orleans, Graham spent 3 years in Seattle, 2 in Green Bay, and then 2 in Chicago. Sat out last year, now at 36 is back in football. The last time we saw Jimmy Graham play in 2021, now that Chicago offense was miserable, okay? That 2021 Bears team was atrocious. And he caught 14 passes for 167 yards and 3 scores. How much of that was Jimmy Graham aging? How much of that was the Bears' offense being atrocious? Probably a little bit of both. For whatever it's worth, when you look at Graham, he went from 520 yards his last year in Seattle in 2017 to 636 his first year with Aaron Rodgers, good season, to 447 to 456 to 167. We've just seen this decline of his production as he's aged, and now we've missed football for a year. I will say that despite perception of Graham, he has been a durable player. In 12 NFL seasons, he's missed a total of 7 games. During his 5 years in New Orleans, he missed a total of 2 games. He played through a lot of injuries and is a very tough player, despite the perception that he is not, because he was more of a finesse wide receiver and not Gronk or Kittle or Kelsey, these sort of polar bears running down the field. But I look and I go, man, this is a crowded tight end room. It's why it was interesting hearing Mickey Loomis say they had a need. Because I look at tight end for the Saints and I don't see need. You brought in Foster Moreau in free agency. You have Juwan Johnson, who you signed to a 2-year contract. That satisfies what the Saints have normally done. Pass-catching tight end and more traditional tight end as the attached tight end who can also catch passes. You have those 2 guys. You also have Taysom Hill, who's a hybrid, who plays the role he does. And then they really like Lucas Krull, who was an undrafted free agent they got last year out of Pittsburgh. So you've got a little bit of a crowded room. Now, if you're just thinking, okay, here's another athletic, versatile pass catcher, okay. If you're thinking, here's a veteran player who can maybe help the younger guys along, sure. I'm not convinced Jimmy Graham's going to make this team. Maybe he shows up and is magnificent and in great shape and is what he just picks up where he left off when he left here 8 years ago. But I think it's a really steep hill to climb for him to even make this team, considering you've already got Morrow and Johnson, who are locks to make the team. And then Hill, who's a hybrid player listed as a tight end. Are you going to keep a third true tight end and a 4th player listed at tight end? That's hard to imagine. But they'll strap it up and go to camp starting on Wednesday, and we'll see what Jimmy Graham can do. My biggest question is, what does Jimmy Graham still have left in the tank? And we're going to get that answer here relatively soon. Whenever the Saints traded Jimmy Graham, there was a perception that it was a locker room thing. Now, Mickey Loomis was asked about this today. He was asked point blank, was Jimmy Graham ever a locker room problem? Here's the answer.
No, it was never a problem in our locker room, not at all. It was well-liked, well-liked by both our staff and our players, so I wouldn't say that at all. It's just a decision we made at the time in terms of, what we were putting into the position, the value, the It's just a lot of variables involved.
I believe that Jimmy Graham wasn't a locker room issue. I don't believe like Jimmy Graham was a bad guy. I don't think it was like C.D. Deuce. I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson and Michael Thomas were fighting at practice. Like literally, they were throwing punches. So that's a big difference. The narrative of C.D. Deuce a year ago is that he was walking through the locker room like mouthing off about management, like loudly and on the practice field about him wanting to get paid. The thing about Jimmy Graham is, remember, he went through this really contentious situation where he wanted to be paid like a receiver. He wanted to be franchised as a receiver and not as a tight end, and he lost that battle. So perhaps it was a deal where the Saints realized, look, we're never going to pay you what you think you're worth. Let's get something for you now before you just walk in free agency. So either way, it was and Graham has said this on the record. He did a long-form interview last year where he talked about never wanting to leave and always wondering what could have been had he stayed in New Orleans catching passes from Drew Brees in Sean Payton's offense, which was perfect for him. And we're never really going to know. This feels a lot like when Mayweather and Pacquiao finally fought and both dudes were 40. We got to see the fight, but it wasn't what it would have been if we saw it in their prime. Kind of feels like it now. We're going to get to see Graham back in 80, back in the black and gold, back in the dome, dunking on the, well, probably not dunking on the goalpost because that's illegal now because Jimmy Graham used to bend goalposts when he would do it. But it's probably just a little past his prime. I'm excited for it. I'm intrigued by it. We'll see what he's got left in the tank. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.